Hello, Owen.
Hello.
Welcome to Barcelona.
Nice, pleasure. Great to see you. Great to see you.
Okay, so many things to talk about. Common people have lost many rights in all these years, and at the same time, a tiny minority has concentrated a lot of political, economical power. You have defined this minority as the establishment. Here in Catalonia, we have one member of the traditional Catalan families, who's called Félix Millet. He said, we are 400 families and we are always the same families. Would that fit in your concept of establishment, or is it a broader category?
Well, I think establishments differ from country to country, and they depend on the historical, political, cultural context of each country, which is obviously very, very different. The principle applies, which is not just that wealth and power is concentrated in very few hands, but the institutions and the ideas that legitimise, that justify, that rationalise such a concentration, that make it institutionally viable and ideologically rationalised and supported. And so, a traditional, often establishment is one which is families going back many, many generations, where their power and wealth is passed on from generation to generation. And obviously, we still get that, including in Britain. We still have the remnants of our aristocracy. For example, that's very much the remnants of the old feudal order in Britain, the descendants of the Norman invaders who invaded the country in 1066. We have other families who are big business families who often, again, they pass on their contacts, networks, all the rest of it. But for me, I suppose what I was saying in this case, it wasn't about backgrounds, because if someone's from a working class background and ends up the CEO of a multinational bank, or that's less likely to happen, of course. But does that mean they're not part of the establishment? I'd say they still are. For me, the establishment, who's got power? And how it's exercised, and it's about how they're united by common shared interests, primarily economic interests, and how they're bound together by a shared mentality, which people often call neoliberalism, that free markets, but so they call it free markets, privatisation, low taxes on the rich, and so on. So yes, obviously part of that, often disproportionately, these are people who've passed on from generation to generation. But my point is that's not necessary. That's not a necessary precondition. The establishment are the institutions and ideas that protect concentration of wealth and power in very few hands, even if it happens to be someone who maybe was born, poor and ended up rich.
Right. I mean, because common people, the working class, have also conquered some important rights as the right to vote, our ancestors that have fought for these rights. But at the same time, we are seeing through Europe many common people, many working class people voting for xenophobic alternatives, even for right-wing alternatives. What are the mistakes that the left should not commit again? I mean, how can we build a different cultural hegemony to right now?
Well, the point you make about democracy is critical, because democracy is inherently subversive. What democracy did, and the reason the powerful, resisted democracy so much, is because they were aware with democracy you get a redistribution of wealth and power, that if everyone can vote, they will use that vote to support policies which will mean more wealth and power is equally distributed. And that's why it was always resisted throughout our history, and there's been a power grab in the last generation, an attempt by the powerful to win back what they lost because of democracy. But in terms of, obviously, what we've seen in many countries, including my own, are people, working class people, voting for xenophobic right-wing populist parties. And there's discontent all over the Western world at the moment, understandably so. And it's going in these two directions, both the right-wing populists and the progressive movements. So you get progressive movements of different shades, the Scottish independence movement, right, what's happening in Catalonia also. Syriza, the Corbyn phenomenon in Britain, but you also and you get Bernie Sanders in the United States, but then you get these xenophobic parties like Golden Dawn neo-Nazis, Front National in France, UKIP in Britain. And partly, I mean, what they're doing is they're saying often to people, your life is hard, it's tough. And the reason it's hard and tough is because of these immigrants. They're taking your jobs, they're taking homes that should be yours, they're undermining your services. So they deflect anger away from those responsible to be, they latch onto real problems, lack of jobs, falling wages, bad services because of austerity, and they blame the wrong people. And it is a symptom of the failure of the left, and this shows in Spain how that's why it's a model. Spain and Catalonia and Spain, it's such a model because you don't have a mass party of the sort of the National Front or UKIP or whatever. I know you have obviously right-wing parties and all the rest, but you don't have it of that particular breed. And I think it's because of the failure of the left to communicate in a way that resonates with people. Because most people don't think about left or right, they think about issues to be addressed in a convincing, coherent way, told in a language they understand, that resonates with their experiences. And the left often will use very alienating rhetoric and language, not understand the priorities of people, because you've got to start where people are. I think also, you've got to build a grassroots movement, and they go together, because the more you have a grassroots movement, the more the way you communicate and understand the problems affecting people, because you will be educated by this grassroots movement. And that's happened in Catalonia and in Spain as well. But for me, the left, I think in Britain and elsewhere, a catastrophic failure to communicate in a way that resonates with people. And the definition of insanity, according to Albert Einstein, apparently Albert Einstein, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And the left have done that now. And I think we should just get it out of our system. We can keep flying our red flags and, talking about socialism or even neoliberalism to criticise the way people. That's not how people think or talk. You've got to start with how people talk.
Is Europe part of the problem? Could Europe be part of the solution?
European Union or Europe?
Well, that's one interesting question, because sometimes we confuse the idea of Europe with the existing European Union. So how do you see that? I mean, that's very important for us. We're just running a city right now, but for us it's very important to see that the alternative we need to build up has to be an European or an international alternative. How can we confront this idea with the actual European Union?
Well, Europe itself is certainly part of the solution, and because injustice doesn't know borders, so we can't know those borders either. We have to, we can't win alone. We have to unite across the European continent. All these movements have to link together. We speak different languages, so we should speak the same language politically. So what we need to do, it's easier to travel and there's social media, so we've got to use this to link together, and that's partly why I'm here in Catalonia and in Spain, because for me, I know that we're not going to succeed one country at a time. The European Union needs to be changed dramatically, because the European Union at the moment, you see the direction in which it's heading in, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, negotiated with the United States, which would give corporations the same legal rights as nations, and the ability to sue governments for policies they don't like in secret courts. Obviously, the imposition of disastrous austerity all over the European Union, the Eurozone in particular, we've seen what's happened to Greece, but Spain obviously has faced calamity as well, Portugal as well, but other countries to different degrees. So we've seen that, treaties that enforce privatisation and the selling off of public assets. So the European Union needs to be changed. And I welcome, the initiatives, for example, of Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister.
How do you see that initiative?
Exactly.
It's plan B for Europe.
Exactly, and I think people need to organise around that initiative to change the European Union, but that can only happen if people unite across borders.
You finish your book about the establishment advocating for a democratic revolution, which is a concept that we also use here in Barcelona and many other cities in Catalonia and in Spain. I think that one of the key aspects of the democratic revolution, that's a challenge for all progressive forces, is democratizing economy. How can we democratize economy now? What would that mean?
I think it's an absolute critical point, and what we need to do, rather than just seeing democracy as, politics is something you do every 5 years or 4 years or whatever, depends on the country, 4 years in this country, it should be, we want the democratisation of all parts of life, we want a genuine democracy, and that of course means the economy, and I'd like to see, not the old, we had this old form of nationalisation, which was very top down, run by bureaucrats at the top, And they were easily privatised because people often didn't feel they had anything to do with these industries or services. So instead, we need to look at a new democratic social ownership where workers and service users and consumers can democratically have an involvement in the running of those services. In Britain, one idea we had, because we privatised our, I didn't, but the Tories, the Conservatives privatised our trains. It is, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how disastrous that's been. We have, some of the highest fares in Europe, and if you have had the misfortune to use the British train system, it probably feels like you've gone to, frankly, a country you'd expect, in the global south, not a country you'd expect in a developed nation at all. But the idea rail trade unions are talking about is if we bring it into public ownership, we won't do it like we did last time, but where passengers and rail workers will democratically manage, elect representatives to help manage the services. That's a good principle. In the workplace, I'd like to see workplace representatives sitting on company boards, for example, and having a genuine say in the running. I'd like, I look at other examples at the moment. Climate change is one of the big existential crises we face. And in places like Germany, you've had public ownership from below, where communities set up their own energy supplies and own them on a community level. There's lots of different things we need to be exploring, which would change the economy so that workers and service users and consumers have democratic control over them.
Yes, I mean, ecology, gender equality, we could talk about many other things, but, well, just I want to thank you. I hope we can keep on with this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you to Catalonia and Spain for inspiring us.
for your solidarity and for being part of this international brigade in these days here in Barcelona. Thank you very much.
Gracias.